Good morning to our Pacific time zone member. Good afternoon to our Eastern Seaboard member, and good evening to all our international friends that are joining us from Europe and Asia and all over the world. Welcome to the Consulting Mindset webinar hosted by Syed Asim Rashid, where he will be sharing how consultants can successfully navigate through challenges and build a better tomorrow for ourselves. In today's session, it's been sponsored by SkillRanch, an organization that is providing training and coaching and seminars to empower individuals and organizations. SkillRanch also hosts a podcast that gives knowledge on hard skills and soft skills for entrepreneurs, professionals, and consultants to impact tomorrow's work environment. You can find us at anchor.fm, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. And if you wish to be a guest on my podcast, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. And today's session is being co-hosted by Trevor Poplar, who is the managing director of 50,000 Foot Company. Over to you, Trevor.
Thank you, Bilal, and I appreciate you passing it over to me. I'm very pleased to help bring everyone on this session together today, as 50,000 Foot is focused on supporting independent consultants and small consulting firms through their journey. Following today's discussion, I will provide a little bit more information about 50,000 Foot, but what I would like to highlight today is that today is the first day and the launch of 50,000 Foot's first ever National Consultant Day. We want to recognize the contribution consultants make to businesses worldwide, and what better way to celebrate and have our guest speaker provide us a little bit more detail on the consulting mindset. So without further ado, I would like to introduce CreativeSwan. CreativeSwan is run by Syed Asim Rashid, and it's a management consulting firm providing consulting, advisory, coaching, and workshop solutions to a wide array of industries and areas for over 24 years. Asim, our guest speaker and the president and CEO of CreativeSwan, is an internationally recognized leader and consultant who is graciously given us some time today. So without further delay, I want to pass things over to Asim and look forward to hearing his session and what we need to understand about the proper consulting mindset. Asim, let me pass it over to you.
Thank you very much, Trevor and Bilal. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for having me. It's wonderful to come and speak with all of you on this occasion. It's fantastic. And the topic is very interesting, the mindset of a consultant or the consulting mindset. Before we take a start formally on this discussion, I would like to run a poll. So Trevor, can we have the poll running first? Okay, so on your screen, you have a question, which is gaining and retraining people's trust is the top challenge caused by changing client behavior. Yes or no? Oh, fantastic. The result shows 88%. And this talks a lot about the type of world where we live, because when this survey was conducted a few years ago, the result in terms of yes was 42%, right? And this really tells us that we live in a VUCA world, which is fast changing, complex, and really volatile. Within 2 to 3 years, we see that the survey results are totally different, and it's jumping from 42% to 88%. Thank you very much, Trevor. So fantastic to hear that. So in today's discussion, what I would like to do is, consultants are famous for telling stories. So I would like to talk about a couple of cases, a couple of stories, and then we will try to understand what's a successful consultant's mindset should be, or how it should be working in terms of executing projects for the clients. So the first story that I would like to tell you is about one of my clients that belongs to construction industry. And in terms of construction industry, this client is very diversified. So they have EPC division, they have infrastructure division, they do engineering and construction projects, they are into O&M, operation and maintenance, they are into manufacturing, service operations, and all that. So the client of mine actually hired me to conduct a job for them, which was about developing competency framework. And this competency framework was very interesting to develop because they wanted to develop one competency framework across the 5 divisions. And the 5 divisions, as per the discussion, actually did not agree that all of them can have a similar or identical set of competency framework. Now, this competency framework was pretty important because based on that, they were supposed to develop their people in terms of execution of projects, in terms of developing future leaders. But at the same time, it was pretty hard to seek consensus. And that's where, you know, the value of an external consultant comes into action or comes into play. So when I was supposed to deal with that situation, you know, I had to talk to a lot of people in different divisions, and then we decided to conduct some sort of a design thinking workshops where we had a lot of people coming from all divisions, including leaders, and then we talk about how to address the challenges. So some of the interesting things that were in the room was that, you know, when different divisions pop up into the room, they were of course sitting according to their divisions. And at the same time, they were also of the opinion that the things are not going to be identical for different divisions. So you cannot have one solution for all the divisions. So the way I started was that I did a lot of research, not only about the client, but I also went into the international clients of different parts of the world who are actually operating in similar kind of business. And based on their best practices, I pulled together an initial orientation style presentation, which was very brief and to the point because we had many senior people around. So you cannot just go and talk about theoretical or academic stuff. So we had some fantastic orientation in the beginning, and I shared some of the best practices that are being adopted by businesses across the world who are into similar kind of businesses. And once I did that, then we had the conversation. One of the things that I found in the room was that different divisions, you know, they were not willing to accept that there could be similarities between them. So I conducted a couple of design thinking exercises and tried to, you know, help them understand that there are similarities more than the differences. And we had a couple of sessions of that. And after, you know, some effort, we came to the point where we actually started to make some progress. And yes, there were still some, you know, barriers to change. There were some people who could not buy into the solution, and some of the people even challenged the solution. In fact, some people also came up with the idea that this whole exercise, how we are doing that. So for example, you're a consultant, you have a methodology, and then there's a client who start challenging your methodology as well. So, you know, it was supposed to be managed through skills like influencing, creating internal partnerships in the room, creating partnership with the leadership, and making sure that we cross through the barriers and move to the next part of the equation. And once, you know, some of those elements were handled, even the team was able to see that the kind of dissimilarities that they were thinking exist between them were actually not as much as they thought initially. So there were more similarities. And finally, you know, at the end of the day, we came up with a solution. We were able to create competency framework, which was pretty much consistent. And yes, there were some things which were specific to the divisions, and then we worked with the divisions so that divisions can have some of those areas highlighted as exceptions or exclusions so that everybody could agree to it and move on. So that was a fantastic experience where 5 or 6 different divisions were totally different. At the end of the day, they came up with the solution themselves, and they themselves said that, you know what, we probably have more similarities than dissimilarities. And yes, there are areas where we are supposed to work in a different manner or in a different fashion. This is an example from a construction industry project. Now, the second story that I would like to discuss with you comes from energy industry. So one of the companies, energy companies, oil and gas company, in fact, upstream, was going through the phase of an acquisition. And they were towards the end of the year where they had some budgets remaining to be consumed. And somehow I was contacted, and when I asked them what you are looking for, they said, look, before the acquisition, we have certain budgets which are available, and we would like to make a great use of this budget. So you suggest, what do you think we should be doing? So what I told them is that, look, you guys are going to be acquired by a company, which is another oil company. And once you're acquired by them, you both come from different backgrounds, different cultures in terms of business, in terms of company. So you're going to experience a lot of anxiety, lots of challenges because you have different business cultures, you will be acquired. your status is going to change, organization will merge, it will restructure, there could be job losses, there could be, people could move upward in the organization. So why don't we do something related to that? And they were actually very keen to do something interesting. So I suggested that why don't we do a program where we actually make your people understand how business cultures in different parts of the world or in different type of companies merge or coincide or collide. So I created a very specific bespoke kind of a workshop and intervention for them where we work together with those clients, and we also try to understand how the different energy companies operate in terms of their business culture, in terms of their methodology, in terms of their growth and expansion plans and all that. And in that particular exercise, I kind of try to create a lot of understanding and awareness in terms of what's probably going to happen tomorrow. Now, I did that. A lot of people appreciated and enjoyed. But the most interesting thing happened roughly a year later, when actually the two companies who were merged together, I was invited again by the company that actually acquired that company to conduct a change leadership program. And interestingly, there were people sitting in that room who were actually part of that exercise a year earlier. And then we had a very interesting experience where a lot of people were on board on many, many things. And we were able to conduct a very comprehensive workout and design thinking workshop in terms of how to move forward after this change process. So interestingly, something that you do for a client in this fast-paced world, tomorrow that client can be acquired by another client. And when you go and work for them, that could be your advantage. So when I was actually working for this company that acquired the other company, I was kind of a preferred choice because I had a very good background. I knew both the businesses, I knew their challenges, I even understood in terms of how they were feeling about that acquisition when that acquisition was actually happening. So if you deliver to a client a bespoke solution, the need of the hour kind of a solution, then from where tomorrow it's going to help you, you have actually no idea about that. So these were the two stories that I wanted to begin with. And right at this point, if we could take a quick break and maybe run a second poll, Trevor. So here's question number 2. Management consulting firms can boost their profitability by reducing expenses. Easy question. Yes, no. Oh, great. So we are seeing a 55% yes and a 48% no. Now, this is pretty interesting because 2 or 3 years ago, when this similar kind of a survey was conducted, pre-COVID situation, so they were like 74% yes. But today, the number has been reduced to 55%. Again, a reflection of the changing world, the VUCA world, as we always talk about. Great. Thank you, Trevor. So Trevor, can we take a few questions over here at this point?
Absolutely. Yeah, if you have a question, please take your microphone off mute, ask the question, and we'll take a few moments to see if anybody has anything that they're interested in asking Asim.
Okay. So what was the question? I saw it on the screen that I'm a new person, new consultant, maybe. And
Yep.
what's the
So
advice
the question is, I am from Pakistan and new in the field. What advice would you give to beginners?
Oh, that's fantastic. I would say that there is a piece of advice that will come towards the end of the session. So if you could hold on to that question, you will get like plenty of advice towards the end. A summary of advices, actually.
Okay, Sam, let's return back to the presentation, and we'll readdress at the Q&A.
Okay, great.
Sorry, every time I say that, I apologize. A
Yeah.
question does come in. Okay,
Yeah,
so we have another question. And no apology needed, Lisa. My fault, I overspoke too soon.
Yeah.
The question is, how do you manage pushing a new program in an organization when there are already mature, established programs and a lot of pushback?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And this is kind of a perfect question that we ask when we run change management program or the change leadership program. So there is a classic way to do that. And I would say that the first and the foremost thing that, I've experienced in this whole process is that, you create a sense of urgency. I think that's the most important thing. When you begin a change management program, you have to have a leadership buy-in, because unless you do not have a leadership buy-in, it is really hard, and I would say next to impossible, to drive change management programs. Once you have the leadership buy-in and you create a sense of urgency in the organization, and you create change agents within the organization, because not everybody is going to support your change management program for one reason or the other, um, then you can start driving the change. So you can conduct various interventions. You can conduct a change management program where you can actually let people vent out what they feel is right or wrong about the change. And then you can come up with the stakeholder buy-in, and you can move from there. But the challenge is this is going to continue. And you have to have those change agents spread across the organization who believe in that agenda from their heart, that this is the best thing for the company, and they should be influencing in their departments and divisions. Now, from my experience, one of the mistakes that people make in this process is that sometimes they feel that if there are people who are senior in the organization, or they might have spent more time over there, if they push back on something, they start considering them like internal enemies. And that's a huge mistake, because some of these people who may not be at a leadership position, they do carry out a lot of influence and respect across the organization. So they are sort of unofficial leaders. People listen to them. So it is very important to convince some of those guys and try to address their challenges and solve them. And let me tell you something very interesting. I was in a digital summit this afternoon, and I just was sharing a point with them about a PwC study, which says that 75% of change initiatives will fail, all due to the lack of a digital culture. So for example, if you are trying to bring change in terms of digital transformation, then 75% initiatives will fail because of the culture. So sometimes people try to bring change without considering the culture of the organization. So that is also very, very important. So it's a combination of several steps. Take it one by one, and then go through the process. And communication is the key. There's, I mean, no limit to communication that you do during the change management process. Does this address your question?
I think that was a great Asim. We do have one more question from Uzman that came in. This will be the last question we'll take at this period, and then we'll move on. Lisa does say yes, thank you very much. And Uzman's question is, I'm working in hydropower consulting field, and I've noticed that the consulting future is sorry, let me read this again. I'm working in the hydropower consulting field. I have noticed that the consulting future is no anymore because of EPC contracts. What is your opinion on that? Please elaborate.
Yeah, so look, there are various types of consulting services that we provide, all of us provide. So there is technical consulting, then there is process consulting, right? So technical consulting is something in which you are technically expert and you go and you provide the technical service. And yes, as you just said, that, you know, as long as bigger players enter into the technical domain, the technical consulting of individuals or smaller firms could be challenged, because, you know, those EPC firms are like mammoths, they are giants. However, if you think about process consulting, that's a great area to explore, I would say, because in process consulting, you are not an expert on the technicality of any industry, but you know the process of problem solving. So you go there, you talk to people, you work with them, you work through them, you work within them, and then you evolve the solutions from them, right? So that's the way to go about it. So my view is that in any industry, if you see that the future is bleak one way or the other, the question for you is, disruption is coming. Either you disrupt or you will be disrupted, right? So the key question is that if something is coming up and someone can see that, than what he or she is doing about it. I think that's the key question one should ask himself or herself. That would be my answer to this. You're welcome, Usman. Good. So, Trevor, if there are no more questions, can we move on or?
Yes, there's another question, but I'm going to hold it to the end, and we'll address it in the question and answer period.
Oh, that's fantastic. Okay, so I'll take you, I talked about the construction industry, then I talked about energy industry, and I'll take you to a business school, right? That's a very interesting assignment that I had. And as I promised in the beginning, I'll just talk from my experience. I'll tell you my story. Some people say consultants just get paid for telling stories, right? But these are genuine, real stories where actually I was able to solve some problems for the clients. So this client is basically a very prestigious business school, and they had developed a strategy framework, and they just want to make sure that there's a good discussion and progress on that strategy framework. Now, some of you who have worked with business schools and universities and educational institutions, you understand that they have a very different way of operation. Just like, we compare corporate sector, private sector versus public sector, the government offices. So there's a very big difference in terms of how the business schools or the universities operate. So my task as a consultant was to work with a team of 30 plus brightest minds. Majority of them were department heads and PhDs and extremely qualified people in different domains, right from, social sciences towards economics, and from business to mathematics and IT to, some of the executive education areas and financing and accounting, HR, marketing, very diversified experts, very learned people. So my job was to bring consensus on some of the areas. And that was a tough job because, as you can understand, that academics, they do not argue like the corporate sector people, right? They argue based on hypothesis. They have a very educated way of conducting debates. All those things that we study in the research when we do our MBAs or senior level projects and all that. So I had to prepare for that. It was a tough project. So I met with a lot of people, tried to understand the challenges, the future perspectives, the organizational health. I also spoke with the key customer, which was the students, of different areas, and tried to gather as much information as I could possibly can. So once I had all that information, we went into that, retreat workout, and we conducted the sessions. But look, we are talking about academics, right? So if you go there and as a plain corporate person or consultant, it's not going to work out like that. So you have to go and show to the people that you have come with great homework and you're speaking somewhat a similar kind of a language. You earn their respect and trust, and only then the conversation, the real conversation will probably begin. So one of the things that I did was I actually looked at the trends in the education sector, especially business education and higher level education. I looked at the trends globally, what is happening, experimentations that universities are making. Like, for example, some of the US universities are trying to create a design studio where they put an MBA with an engineer and a doctor, and they work together on a project to create something very interesting. Now, that's a very interesting thing. Another experiments, some of the places are doing where they are actually bringing people from different parts of the world who are working in different universities, and they do virtual online projects, and with their different countries, background, knowledge, cultures, they're able to create something totally different, totally unique. So the first thing that I tried to do was I just tried to share the future trends, what's going to happen in the future of education, the university of the future. So just to elaborate, a little more on that. So I spoke about Professor Clayton Christensen, who is very famous for his theory on digital innovative disruption. And Professor Clayton Christensen, who is called Clay, spoke a lot about disruption happening in the university, and he wrote a book and some articles in which he argued that brick and mortar campuses will vanish in the future. So I brought some of that stuff, his books, references, and all that. And, like in the first few hours, I was able to break the ice and the conversation began. And when the conversation began, one of the important things for me was to make sure that, the conversation happens in a way that I'm just a facilitator. So I'm not a subject matter expert. As I was just giving an example, that in process consulting, you're not an SME necessarily, but you own the process. So you create the structure. And in the first few hours, we were able to generate very interesting debates. And then I had to sort of split the teams in a way that people could work together in working groups. And there were there were arguments, there were debates, and there were some of the people who had their own opinion about things. And I had to intervene at some points. I had to actually mediate between two people. At times I had to negotiate among people. At times I had to take even a hard stance, So basically, even in the hard stance situation, you have to make sure that people understand that you're part of the team. You're trying to make progress overall. And that's the way it goes. So it was a very, very tough assignment. And as I just mentioned, that there was tremendous PhD population in the room. And at the end of the day, we came out very successful. And one of the academics, during the lunch break or tea break, when I sat with them, I just laughed with them. We had fun. And one of the academics told me that, no, actually, I asked him a question. There's a terminology called peer review in which they review each other's articles. So I just joked with them, oh, you guys have done my peer review? Am I passed? So they laughed and they said, even before you entered the room in the morning, your peer review was done, right? So we were just watching you for the first few hours, how it goes, what do you do, what do you say? And we appreciated that you came up with a lot of great homework. So homework is very important. That earns you the respect. And once you have the respect, people are able to kind of listen to you. So this was just another story in which, some of the preparation, some of the high horsepower of, mindsets and minds was there in the room. And we were able to come up with a very good, growth plan, strategy execution plan, an action plan where people could actually go back and own the plan because it was generated by themselves as part of the change process, could go back and execute. So it was a great, great project that, I felt very proud of. So these were the three important, some of the important stories that I wanted to share from three different industries. And before we actually go towards the Q&A, what I wanted to do is, I want you to go back or go away with like a couple of takeaways from all these three stories as a summary. So we all know about the 7 wonders of the world, right? So what I want is that you think of the 7 wonders of consulting, right? And here are the 7 wonders of consulting in my view. So wonder number 1, fact, preparation, research. It's going to earn a lot of respect from the client for you. And once you're able to earn the respect, you can really move things around. You can make progress, right? So fact. Number 2, the second wonder of consulting. Get involved in the problem-solving process inclusively. So it's not that you provide a structure of problem solving to people and you just let them solve the problem. Well, you have to get involved with them. And that means sometimes coming in the middle of a heated argument between two people and sort of mediating the situation, doing the conflict management, and making progress, driving it forward. So solve the problem, but in an inclusive manner. Number 3, listen. Be empathetic, right? One of the challenges with consultants is they do so many projects. Busy consultants do work in different industries all the time. So they always have ready-made solutions like the back of their hand. They know the solution. But the problem is that this takes you into a situation where you look at the problem and you have a solution. It's the same thing that, if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail to you. So please listen to the client, understand, show empathy, and don't force your solutions from previous experiences on your client. Try to understand, listen, and try to come up with a bespoke solution. The fourth wonder of consulting, jointly build solutions, right? So yeah, you can get into the problem solving process, workouts and all that, but jointly build the solutions, right? Show your value and create a structure, orientation, create an environment, a conducive environment where people actually solve the problems using practical tools and frameworks. And there are so many tools and frameworks that if we start talking about them, we can speak almost an hour about them. So there is Lean, there is Six Sigma, there is VSM, value stream mapping, there is DMAC, right? There's brainstorming, it's brainwriting, fishbone diagram, there is failure mode and effect analysis. On the creativity side, there are mind maps, there are 6 hats, there's design thinking, there are G-style workouts, the famous old-fashioned and evergreen SWOT analysis, the 7S, quarter 5 forces, growth share matrix, and the list goes on. So these are tremendous tools, but you learn as a consultant how to go and apply them, rather than talking about these tools from a theoretical standpoint. The fifth wonder of consulting, get everyone on board. If there are client representatives in a meeting, in a session, who seem to be disengaged for some reason, it's your job to engage them and use your positive influence, right? Because there is a reason why your client has hired you. If they can really solve all the internal problems, probably they don't need to hire you. You are a third person who can earn their respect. And as a third person, you can be a person who is a go-to person for every single guy who is involved in the process. So getting everyone on board is so important, and using your powerful positive influencing skills is the key to the victory. The sixth wonder of consulting, in my view, is negotiate. So whenever you see that there are 2 client departments or divisions or individuals in a meeting, in a setting, who are kind of having opposing views to each other, this is going to hamper the progress of your project. It can also jeopardize your project, right? Your payments can delay as a consultant. Your name can be spoiled as a consultant. So make sure that you negotiate, you manage conflicts, and you are ready to take a hard stance if necessary to make progress, right? So at some point in time where you just feel that as a consultant, a lot of people are challenging you, which will definitely happen, because to be honest with you, when you go to a client's location or facility as a consultant, a lot of people think that you are some consultant, and actually they think that you do not have any working experience. And that's where it is very important that you earn the respect by number 1, which was fact, preparation, research. And once you have the client's respect, a lot of people would be willing to listen to you, even if you give them like a tough talk or a hard talk to people. Now, the seventh and the final wonder of consulting from my side, and you may have your own wonders as well, is, learn how to present, learn how to communicate through, presentations, through data, through email, through events and all that. You measure the results of whatever you are doing, because what gets measured gets done. What gets measured gets better. And once you propose the solutions, you follow up, you adjust, you reapply, you tweak, and you make sure that the things keep moving, right? So it's not just about having a very good knowledge. Your presentation ability and a skill is very important. Several years ago, I was in a meeting with a very large consulting firm, and we had a very good discussion, myself and the senior consulting manager over there. And the guy, before I left, he just stopped me and said, "Hey, you know what? We won't be able to give you an assistant." So I smiled and I said, "Look, you know what? I don't need an assistant because I just do my stuff myself." So this is another important thing, that if you have too many assignments or too many projects, it's very important that you focus on communication. Because many clients, they actually look forward towards you in terms of how you present data and how you present facts. Sometimes you may have great consulting assignment results, but you are unable to present the data to them. Another important thing is that, as a technical person, at times you may have a tendency to go too deep into the technical affairs, while the people who are sitting in the room belong to the senior leadership. So they speak a different language and they would like to hear a different language. So if you are trying to talk to them in terms of items or areas which are too close to the field, they may not be interested in that. They would like to know what's the bottom line impact on the profit margin. how your actions and steps will translate into additional sales, improvement in quality, reduction in cycle time, improved delivery for the customer, a better net promoter score from the client, a better feedback from the client, or improving the overall productivity or efficiency in their plant or the factory or the core operations. So speak the right language. So communication is a very, very important factor. And finally, you know, as I always like to say, that people talk about disruption all the time. Look, disruption is not coming. People say AI is coming, artificial intelligence is coming. Disruption is not coming. AI is not coming. It's already here. 67% of the people actually do not know that they are using AI. They are using artificial intelligence. They do not know that. 67% according to a survey. And you understand these surveys change every minute, every second these days. So the data is increasing, the data is changing, the data is fast evolving. So my final message is that disruption is here. Disrupt or be disrupted. And thank you very much, everyone, for your time and attention.
Thank you, Amir. Thank you for sharing your stories, your insights. Thank you for sharing your 7 wonders of consulting. It's definitely given me a lot to think about and to take away from this session. And we really appreciate your insight and sticking around and answering some questions. We've got a few questions that have appeared in the chat box that we'll cover momentarily. And your continued insight will be much appreciated. Before everybody, we move on to that component, the Q&A session, I just want to take 2 more minutes of your time just to highlight 50,000 Foot and what we are trying to accomplish as a platform. We at 50,000 Foot are providing solutions to help strengthen consultants, independent consultants, and small consulting firms, and help them to find new heights within their business. We do that in 5 ways. Those 5 ways are listed on the screen. We want to help consultants build stronger client base. So grow your network and share opportunities amongst each other so that we can continue to strengthen this community that's growing each and every day globally. We want to continue to expand engagements for our population. So find new and exciting opportunities across the board, from teaming up and going after larger opportunities that may not be in reach individually, to micro engagements, to a number of different learning opportunities that can help you challenge yourself in your business. We help consultants on our site grow their revenues. We do that in a number of different ways. We have additional revenue partner programs coming that allow you to expand your discussion with your clients. And we have ways in which you can license and share your IP with the community. We want to maximize your non-billable time. So meaning we're bringing partners to our clients that can help you find the solutions you need to lower your risk and spend more time working on billable projects. But finally, the goal is to help you create your brand recognition and bring your market to the business in a more sustainable and long-term way. So please, if you have a moment, go to 50,000foot.com, learn a little bit more about what we're doing as a community, as it's very important that we continue, just as Asim has talked about, to grow our skill set and make independent consulting and small consulting firms more powerful globally. I'm going to open it to Bilal now, and Bilal will open the question and period session, and I'll go through some of the questions that show up on the chat forum. So Bilal, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you so much, Trevor and Asim, for a wonderful session on the consulting mindset. And we can start the question that we have in chat, and then we can move towards live Q&A. So Usman Gani asked Asim that I have noticed in construction industry, especially in hydropower, that people think the role of consulting is just make stories and make hindrances in execution work. I think in hydropower field, client just hired the consultant due to FIDIC contracts. What are your thoughts on it, Asim?
Okay, Bilal, so I couldn't hear exactly because I think the voice was breaking a little bit. So I would try to construct an answer based on what I understood. So one of the things that we have to understand is that hydropower projects are high dollar value projects, right? And they are the type of projects in which you have to have funding from very large financial institutions, people like World Bank or Asian Development Bank and all that. Now, when you have to have such financial institutions involved in the process, you have to understand that they have their own process, their own checklists to come and assess you as an organization. And many times you have to take a partner on board who also takes stake in the project or equity in the project. Even the EPC partner sometimes should be large enough to come up with some of those things. Now, what happened is that when you hire consultants in projects like that, they have to take blessings from many stakeholders, including those financial institutions, right? So those financial institutions sometimes are kind of, geared towards those consultants who have already worked with them in the past, who understand their process, procedures, documentation requirements, and they have a tendency to kind of route you towards those consultants, because everyone's job becomes much easier. They can connect with the client better and also explain to the client what's needed by some of those financial institutions. So yes, I mean, for hydro projects, which are high dollar value projects, the game is totally different. And as I just mentioned, that in this type of projects, the type of consultants that you need are totally different. They are very different from process consultants, from management consultants. They are generally pretty sort of well-groomed in terms of handling the techno-financial aspect of the project. So that's why, hydro is again a very specialized area. We have to understand that. Not everyone can just walk into a hydropower project and start doing things from a technical standpoint as well as commercial standpoint. So yes, I mean, it takes time to develop expertise as a consultant in those projects. And if you get a chance to work with some of the larger financial institutions in one of those projects, it's going to be great learning. And then that will open the way for you across the world. So for example, if you work on an ADB project, Asian Development Bank project, they would love to have you back on their project within the region because you understand the requirement and all that in terms of documentation. So yeah, it takes time, but once you do enough hard work, it's very rewarding as well. And it's in terms of Porter's 5 forces, the barrier to entry is high. That's what I would say. Not everyone would like to enter here, but once you enter and learn, I mean, it's your field. Not everyone can enter over there.
Asim, we have another question from Mohammed. The question is, I hold a global role and work with an oil major, part of a very diverse team. There are senior colleagues in the team. Those are close to retirement almost. And there are always been a push to drive any change program in the department. It's a big struggle, actually, how to tackle such situations in a team when the people are not willing to own the change. What would be your thoughts around that question?
Yeah, my thoughts around this question is that oil industry is not now, for the last few years, it is going through a process which is termed as the Great Crew Shift. The Great Crew Shift. So a lot of people in oil industry, there was a trend that people would retire and then they would continue to work as consultants, even in their late 70s and all that, because we have to understand that those people who spend time in oil industry in the early part, they actually developed so much of experience that they became like, I would say like gems. And a lot of those people had very wide degrees. So imagine somebody who was a mechanical engineer from 30, 40, 50 years ago, who is mechanical as well as electrical. Now, today you have petroleum, right? You have mechanical, you have automotive, you have manufacturing, you have industrial. But that person was very diversified, and then that person had a lot of diversified experience. So that great crew shift is happening because that generation, basically the baby boomer generation, is actually gradually getting out from the workplace. And while they are moving out, Gen X or millennials are coming up to fill up the space. Of course, there is a gap in the way of thinking between these generations. So the challenge is there, but I would say The important thing is that as millennials and Gen X get into the leadership roles, they work together and try to define the future. Because a lot of boomers are almost on the verge of retirement, or they're working on contracts. And look, this is a general human tendency. Let me give you an example. You know, that probably would answer your question. So I was giving a speech in an educational institution, and I talked about, it was somewhere else. I talked about the future of education, and I was talking about skills of the future. And at the end of the class, I asked the teachers, do we teach skills of the future or skills of the past? So almost all teachers said, yeah, we teach skills of the past, by and large. So I said, so what will happen 10 years from now? So the senior most teacher in the room laughed and said, oh, I'll be done and retired by that time, right? But then my question is, if I think like this, what's my legacy? Well, we are supposed to work on our legacy, right? As Jack Ma says that you work on your legacy. So the point is that, yes, it is a challenge. It is very much understandable. But then, you know, seniors should think about their legacy, and the people who are behind them should think about their future. And that's where I think the role of leadership comes into the play, where they bring these generations together, let them sit together, hire a fine consultant. That's where the consultants are needed, right? And solve the solution in an amicable manner. Develop a change management program and drive it with passion. Tough task, I would say.
Thanks, Asim. We've got another question here. It's a two-parter.
Yeah.
Please share your experience on the scope of using data analytics in the consulting industry. And then number two, where does the use of big data analytics stand in the Middle East and in Pakistan?
Okay. So data analytics is very, very important. And it is coming more and more into action. But let me tell you one important thing, that a lot of organizations can still fix a lot of their problem using basic data analytics techniques, right? A lot of people talk about big data, but they do not understand that big data is really big data. So when you have data that you cannot handle with basic tools like Excel, and the data points increase just too much and they become too many, that's where you bring big data into the equation. You don't have to bring big data into everything, basic solutions and all that. So data analytics is a very important element. And I would say that not just in manufacturing, but also everywhere, you know, there are applications. There is a lot of understanding, and some of these things are very critical in the future of skills and future of jobs. Now, the second part is about big data applications and usage in the Middle East and in Pakistan. So I would say that work is going on. There is a development, there is awareness, people are trying to understand. But when you go and you see a lot of work in the companies, a lot of companies do not have that much data, or you know, in terms of, I'm not trying to say they're not generating data. So you may be generating a lot of data, but you may not be kind of storing and recording it in a way that you can use it for big data analytics. But I would say awareness is there. A lot of organizations are offering courses. A lot of young people are trying to learn. But again, a lot of people need to do a lot of work on that. So it's somewhere in the, I would say, development phase at this point.
We have another question. The question is, how to trust consultant that he will be able to tackle the strategic issues that were outside from the one's experience and expertise, like digital and AI?
If I understand the question correctly, you mean to say that you want to hire a consultant for stuff like digital and AI, and it is beyond his or her capacity or capability. Well, then it's very hard, because I tell you that you may hire a process consultant who is basically an expert on running a design thinking workshop, right? And that design thinking workshop is probably required to create a digital strategy for the company, right? Now, the challenge, as probably I understand correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, that the consultant is not aware of the digital world, right? But the consultant may be an expert on running brainstorming session, or maybe an expert on brainwriting, or FMEA, etc. Now, one of the challenges that I personally feel is that even if you are a process consultant, you have to have some kind of basic knowledge so that when people are talking the terminology, you are able to understand, you're able to connect. So for example, if I do not understand AI uh, or ML, for example, right, or how blockchain operates and work, and I'm trying to facilitate a digital transformation session, then just beyond running the process, the brainstorming process or the design thinking process, it will become harder and harder for me to add value. So I would say that anytime, as I just mentioned to you in the beginning, first wonder was about research, fact, collect it, understand, learn. That's the beauty of being a consultant, right? Every day is a new challenge. Every day you learn new things. So the key point is that you have to have some basic knowledge, some of the ideas. You must know what the other companies or other parts of the world are doing when it comes to digital transformation. Let me give you an example. So if a government hires you and tells you that you come up with an e-governance strategy for that government, then you may want to go and study Estonia, right? Because Estonia is doing fantastic as a digital government. The problem is when you will start to study Estonia, you will see suddenly a lot of digital transformation terminology will pop up. And if you do not understand that, then it will become harder for you to connect the dots. Now, it doesn't mean you have to be a technical person for that, or you have to be kind of an engineer or a computer data scientist, but you should be able to understand and at least explain it in layman terminology. So please differentiate between a technical consultant and a process consultant. So you may be a consultant who may be part of a digital transformation strategy because you're good in terms of knowledge on digital transformation. But when it comes to implementing SAP or Oracle, you may not be the consultant because that requires hardcore technical skills. So that's the way you should be differentiating.
Thanks, Asim. Does anybody else have any questions? I know we've made it to the hour session length, but we are still open. If you're still open to answering a few more questions that you may have, we will keep the field open for a few more moments. Please, it's been working very well in the chat section. So if you have a question and you want it addressed, please enter it into the group chat and I can share it with the community. Asim, Lisa says thank you very much, and she enjoyed it very much herself, and so she appreciates your support and your session today.
Thank you, Lisa.
Okay, we have another question here. If possible, can you give a little more explanation on design thinking you mentioned twice in your examples?
Yeah, so I talked about many tools that consultants can use. And one of the finest tools these days is design thinking. So in a design thinking process, you basically come up with a lot of ideas, and then you select some of the ideas for experimentation and execution. Then you execute them. Then you develop a prototype product or process or experience or service. Then you measure the outcome. Then you come back, fine tune it, and then you redo it. And now this is a way of life, I would say. So in organizations who have pioneered this process, like a very famous organization, which is a design organization called IDEO, which is IDEO. I for Ireland, D for Denmark, E for English, O for Orange, IDEO. That's one of the pioneer companies. And if you go to their website, you will find plenty of knowledge and information about this. So this is a very basic, simple, structured process where you actually generate ideas, filter ideas, prioritize ideas, then you develop a prototype product or process or experience, then you run it, then you come back and you learn it. And it's an inclusive process just to make sure that the whole organization is part of it. So a lot of tech industries these days definitely use this design thinking process. It's an inclusive process where you take everybody and ask for suggestions and all that. So not exactly, but back when Toyota was developing Toyota production system and they had those quality circles and some of those things. So at a different level, at the factory floor level, they had also these ideas of bringing solutions from those people who are closest to the job. But design thinking is at a different level, a different way to do that. So does that help? And you can do further research with the company IDEO. You can also find maybe some of the talks on YouTube about it and fine tune your knowledge on that. That's a very good tool for consultants, and even organizations can do that. Managers can apply that themselves.
We have another follow-up question from Mohammed. Importance of getting ample experience is noted before starting a consultancy. However, is there any ideal age bracket where one should enter into the consultancy field?
That's a great question, and I'll tell you the most practical answer that I've seen. So let's talk about very large consulting firms, the big ones, whose names are like ideal for those who really want to build careers into consulting business. How do they hire, at what age bracket? So the typical people who get hired in those large consulting firms, this is their profile. So they do an undergraduate, and after doing their undergraduate, they go and work in a very large firm because they are among the top performers, 2 to 3 years. Then they go and take an MBA from a top business school, right? So again, undergraduate, then work in a top company. Then after 2 to 3 years, go and take a top university MBA. And after the MBA, you join one of the biggest consulting firms as an associate. And by the time you are joining them, you are somewhere around 27, 28. You're in your late 20s, right? That's the age where you go and join some of those large organizations. And there could be exceptions also. People come with experience and all that. With experience is a separate story, but look at this person who is very young. So how that person earns the respect of the client? They have to study a lot. They have to, go through the research reports. They just read, and come back and, make presentations and make cases, make analysis in front of their seniors. And then they go and present those things in front of, top company, Fortune 500, Fortune 100 company CEOs. Those CEOs are not going to listen to those people who are in their late 20s with no experience if they do not come up with a lot of research. So that's why when I said in the beginning, fact, research. So if you are backing up your answers with a lot of facts, data, numbers, other companies, benchmarking practices and all that, then the CEO will listen to you, because that CEO may not be having the type of exposure that you may have as a consultant or working with several companies. So while there's no ideal age, I just told you that even in your late 20s, you can go and join a consulting firm. Work hard, fact, research, study, and earn the respect from your client, and you will do fantastic. A lot of those consultants are pretty young, in their late 20s, and they're very confident in terms of presenting the right things to very senior people.
Great. We have another question. How can someone enter consulting field with an engineering background?
Well, a lot of consultants are engineers. And if you recall, our former GE chairman, Jack Welch, was a chemical engineer. He was a PhD. And everybody likes to quote him when it comes to management philosophies. So he was a pure PhD kind of an engineer, and he was a great manager. His words are quoted even today. So yes, you can be a consultant, but again, define what kind of consultants you want to be. If you want to be an engineering consultant, that's a different story. if you want to be a management consultant or a process consultant, then it's a good idea that you go and work in a company for some time and develop your skills. And once you develop your skills in terms of technicalities, then probably the right time to move out, look into the consulting area. Because engineering consulting you can always do once you learn the basics while working in the company and developing your experiences about codes and design and all those things. But when it comes to design consulting or management consulting, design means the business design and all that, not the engineering design. Then basically you need some experience that would help you. So yeah, you can enter with experience. And maybe sometimes people say that on top of your engineering, if you take an MBA degree, it actually prepares you in some way towards consulting, because in MBA you actually deal with a lot of industries, and that develops lots of skills in terms of tools and frameworks and presentations, and that actually helps you in terms of developing as a consultant. So one way to do that could be this one.
Great. We actually have another question. Hope you're comfortable in continuing on for a few more minutes. It
Oh,
says,
I'm fine.
okay, great. It says, is it appreciated to quote other companies' data and analysis as an example to different companies' CEOs?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the first thing that you have to see is, as a consultant, um, one of the things is ethics, your consulting ethics. So you work with several clients, you work with several companies. You have to understand from your client, number one, whether you are allowed to use their name in any of the examples or any of the data points and all that. And when it comes to data, it becomes even more severe, even more important. So it is very important that you have to have written permission, in my personal view, from your client before you decide to share their data. Unless I would say if the data is public data. So for example, if you're trying to quote the example of a client, and as an example, you want to share the data from their annual report, which is published and is available on internet. I mean, there's no problem with that because that data falls in the public domain. But the challenge for consultants is that sometimes they sign NDA, the non-disclosure agreement with their clients. So when they sign the NDA, they are not supposed to take any information out of the NDA. Now, sometimes they do not sign NDA, and that's where I think a very important ethical decision comes for the consultant, whether they should be sharing that data or information or not, using the name of the client or without using the name of the client. So, there are situations where actually people sometimes, ask for some information and data because they know that I've worked on some of the projects which are known to people for some reason, because there were, information travels in the open market. But I just tell them that, look, the data is it's client's property, and one of the things that earn you a lot of respect as a consultant is that customers believe that you will not go out and say wrong things about them. So they would trust your judgment, your mental balance, and some of those elements, and that is very, very important. But yeah, I mean, understand one thing, that knowledge stays in your mind, and when you are making decisions, when you're making choices for different people, of course, that knowledge comes into play when it comes to you doing something for those people. So for example, if you're working in, let's say, chemical industry, and you have worked with one client and there's another client from, you understand their challenges could be similar, right? So you can utilize some of the experience to improve the second client's performance. But showing data without consent, I consider it, it's probably not the right thing to do, unless you have written approval from your client.
Okay, next question. Is there any platform to get access to the knowledge and success stories of consultants like you, Asim, where young consultants can gain more insight about solutions proposed by the consultant?
That's a great question. So I also look for that all the time. But I don't very frequently see it from the consultants. But what I do, first of all, I just shared a couple of stories with you, challenges and some of the things. I write about my experiences on LinkedIn, and I go to some of those consulting firms, to their websites, who actually produce documentation on a very regular basis on a mass scale. And I'm talking about the very large consulting firms, right? So many times if you read their articles, if you read their case studies, they write about their experiences all the time. Of course, they never quote the name of the clients unless they have the approval to take the name of the client. So you can go and read on the websites of large consulting firms. There will be plenty of articles which you can read and understand the trends, and you can really learn a lot on those websites. Especially there are reports at times. But the problem is that there's tremendous amount of information, data, and best practices available. It's a 150-page report with charts and data and data points and numbers. People just don't want to read that. If you read that, you will be surprised and amazed at how much information is out there. And I mean, we can just keep learning for the rest of our lives, and the information will not finish. So
Azim, if I can, I'm just going to add a little bit to that. The 50,000 foot platform is designed so that you can create a network, no matter if you're a young consultant, a growing consultant, experienced or retired. It is a forum in which you can connect with different consultants and speak to them about their experience overall. So just making that aware to the community that it is a good place to go and meet clients like Asim and learn more about consulting in general, no matter what level of consultant you're at. We are through the question period. There's no more questions in the chat room. So again, I'd like to just thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate it. For everybody on the line who may have come in a little bit late, we have recorded this session. It will be posted in many different locations, and we will share it out. On the share, we will have a destination where you can ask further questions, and we will be able to get questions and answers returned to you. And so please look for that link, and we'll be sharing out this video moving forward. Any last words, Asim, before we close out the session?
No, I just wanted to thank you, 50,000 foot and SkillRanch, for having me. It was really fun. And I hope people would find it beneficial. And if they would go back with one takeaway, I think that's going to be fantastic. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, everybody. Have a nice morning, evening, or afternoon. Thanks very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you so much.